everyone. We have with us today Sachin, who is the director of Testimony of Anna, which is a film about a woman who is falsely accused of being a witch in a village in Gujarat. So, Sachin, I would like to start from where this idea began. I know you have done a undergraduation program there in Gujarat. So, and how was your primary research like?
Yeah, again, thank you for having me in this podcast, Anchal. And I think to talk a little bit about the genesis of the project and the research process of it. Like, yeah, yes, I did do my bachelor's in the state of Gujarat, so I was aware of a little bit of what was happening in the state back then. It was almost like a decade ago.
Okay.
So I was happening of certain things that were there, but but I couldn't do much about it then because I was an engineer and not a filmmaker.
Hmm.
So only when I joined the film school here in UT, when I was exposed to documentary filmmaking, then I thought, maybe I should revisit. Sorry. So about the genesis and the research process of the film. So yeah, basically. I was aware of the issue of witch hunting back then when I was studying, but I couldn't do much about it. But then later, um, when I got the opportunity to work on a documentary, I thought I should go and revisit this topic of why things were happening. Then the whole research, and I think moreover, the primary motivation came from the alarming relevancy at which these cases were popping up, not just in the
Hmm.
state of Gujarat, but even in like Chhattisgarh, Assam, even in Telangana, for
Hmm.
example, right? Like there were a lot of these cases that were popping up, and then we were seeing activists like Birubala Rabba, who created this amazing organization called Mission Birubala, which
Okay.
was to combat the witch
So, did
hunting
you
attack.
contact them as well?
I didn't contact them, but these were things that happened much later,
Okay. Okay.
close to when I was starting production, and which really sort of put things in perspective.
Hmm.
I got to know not just okay, it's not just about what's happening in Gujarat; it's about what's happening in the country, right? And you can see these activists trying to combat these cases and trying to really stand up for the survivors. So I didn't contact Mission Birbal, although I would have loved to, but that could have been a totally different landscape and totally different
Okay.
film. And the primary reason why I went with Gujarat was just because of the familiarity of the state, because I've spent 4 years of my life there. I know a little bit about
Hmm.
like how people are, the culture is, and how they behave. So there is some sort of familiarity that's associated with it.
Yeah.
So I thought Gujarat would be a good place to just begin, doing research and see what's happening in the state. So that's how I started there, and of course there were a lot of people to thank. Of course, like there were very good journalists in the state of Gujarat.
Hmm.
There were also a lot of social justice lawyers who were practicing in the state of Gujarat to combat these attacks. So, with the help of these individuals, we were able to really try and go into the grassroots and then, really try to talk to people who have experienced such things. And then that's how we found our main character.
Right. Do you think her life changed in a way because of the film?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Because ultimately, it's even though the film, I mean, it's a short film, right? Like, and filmmaking is not the way I see filmmaking is. I don't think how do I put it? Like, it's this famous quote by Hayao Miyazaki, the Japanese filmmaker, who says, "What is it to be a filmmaker?" So he says, like, you have to be determined to change the world, even though nothing really changes in real life. That's what it means to
Yeah.
be a filmmaker, and that's what we try to do, right? There's so much anger, there's so much uh, fire that you really want to change the world through your films, but the sad reality is everything, nobody really cares.
Hmm.
They would because and moreover, this is a short film, it's not even a feature
Right.
uh, length thing. Of course, films do have some sort of impact campaign that you can run, but because we were doing it on a student budget, if that
Hmm.
makes sense, because ultimately this was a student film.
Mm.
There was only so much we could do, and yeah, and I don't, yeah, it's a sad reality.
I would like to get into your background a little bit, like the switch
Sure.
from an engineer to a filmmaker. That's a very
Yes.
interesting, and how your engineering impacts your filmmaking in some way.
Yeah, totally. And like every other person in India, we first we decide what we want to do in life. So that's how it all started. And even when I was doing my bachelor's in Gujarat, I was actually exposed to filmmaking courses in my college. So
Oh,
there was this amazing professor, Mr. Adityanath Sarkar, who taught. We took a semester-long course on Satyajit Ray,
oh wow.
under him. And then we took a semester-long course on science fiction, for example. So that really sparked the interest of films. And by then we were already like voracious cinephiles. We used to consume unhealthy amount of cinema
Hmm.
every day back in the college. So to add to that, to get the curiosity of how movies are being made,
Hmm.
from almost like a behind the scenes point of view, that really sparked the interest. And that's how, and because I did an engineering in bachelor's, the only thing I can do was do masters in engineering. So
Mhm.
I thought, let me just do that and, parallelly try to make something. But then it took quite some time to fully shift
Yeah.
into the field of filmmaking, because applying to film schools requires a portfolio, and
Hmm.
that takes time. And if you want to study in the US for masters, there's loans and you have to pay back those
Yeah.
loans, and that takes some time. So it was a time-taking process, but it was a decision that had to happen, that I had to make at some point to really get into it. And in terms of like, and of course, that's not to say like, engineering is bad or whatever. It's really good. Like I did enjoy whatever time I did, and it does teach you. And with now, especially where things are going in terms of the evolution of film as such, like if you take a look at the technologies like virtual reality,
Yeah.
augmented reality, so you can really combine your engineering skills with storytelling
Yeah.
if you really want to, right? You can build an interactive app,
Hmm.
create a virtual reality experience if you want to really push the boundary on that front.
Right.
So now we are at a stage where all these amalgamation of different skill sets and technologies are happening. So I think we're at a very interesting times
Yeah.
right now. So
Have you
let's see what.
visited NID by any chance?
NID Ahmedabad, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
of
You
course.
visited.
Like my college was in Gandhinagar, so
Oh,
NID was
yeah.
very close
I'm
by.
from NID only.
Oh, lovely, lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'm very familiar with the NID. It's a great, and I do know there were a lot of filmmakers from NID
Yeah.
as well. They making short films, and
Yeah.
I don't know if they're still doing it now, but I
Yeah.
think
Like
maybe.
Pan Nalin and Manish Saini.
Great, great. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, of course.
So coming back to Testimony of Anna, like what were the challenges that you faced during the shoot? I know one of the interviews you said you used to only shoot in the evenings when the farmers used to go.
In the mornings,
In the
actually.
mornings, okay.
Yeah.
So when the farmers used to not be there, but were there any instances where you thought like the crew is in danger or something like that?
No, I think one good thing we did was oh, sorry. One thing we did was we really had a strong support from the locals. What I mean by the locals is the area of Dank. Like the lawyers were practicing there, and like our production assistants were from that region. So we really knew the in and outs of the neighboring villages
Hmm.
in in the dance. So there we truly followed their protocols and based on what they suggested. So for them, they said the best time where we can go without disturbing their day-to-day lives is
Hmm.
once the men in the village go to farming, then the villages usually are more quieter,
Hmm.
like there's less ice on you, basically,
Yeah.
because ultimately the way I view documentary filmmaking is you are trying to sort of invade another person's personal space,
Yeah.
right? They have families, they have their day-to-day jobs, right? And they need to first fully give their consent even for you to come and enter their houses, right?
Hmm.
So that took a lot of time, like that, we really had to make sure the families were comfortable, nobody else was getting, disturbed by
Mm,
what we were doing. So one of the practices we did was we really kept our crew like small. There were just like 3 to 4 people,
mm,
including myself. So,
mm,
with minimal, we didn't have any big cameras. It was a small Canon C300 camera that we took. So looking at all these things, we really wanted to be respectful
mm,
of of how we approach, because I think the process should be, uh, if the process is good in which you try to do, ultimately the film will hopefully turn out to be
yeah.
good. So, but that was the main things we did. And in terms of the main challenges, I think it was to really try and just trying to do justice to the story, right?
Mm,
And what I mean by story is, the main thing we had was, okay, like Ona went through this whole ordeal, and how do we tell it to to the audience in a not, and not in a, not to entertain or
yeah.
anything of that sort, but to how do we tell it with an impact. And for me, that was the main challenge, and I think that is something I faced even in the edit, because there's a point in which you can fall into the temptation of sensationalizing
Yeah. Yeah.
what is happening, right? The minute you start to sensationalize, like many of the Bollywood films that you see,
Mm,
right,
yeah.
then your audience is more into it, right? So
Mm,
we have to resist it. We have to fight that temptation.
yeah.
So how do we, rather than sensationalizing it, how do we tell it with sensitivity, right? Because you're talking about a real person's life, and the whole purpose for me with this film was, this is a testimony that she could have told in the court, for example, in front of a judge.
Mm,
This is the testimony that she could have told. But you take this testimony and then you present it in the film as if she's telling it to the world,
yeah.
right? And that's where my job as a filmmaker comes in. I'm not a lawyer, right? I'm not really fighting here to her to get justice. But
Mm,
what I'm trying to do as a filmmaker, knowing the capabilities and the capacity of my medium, is try to take her story and then present it to the world.
yeah.
One, without sensationalizing it. Two, tackling it with sensitivity and being respectful. And three, being more transparent about the whole process,
Right.
right? Like transparency is important, and it's primarily because there is a easily people could see, oh, what did it happen behind the scenes? How was the relationship between the filmmaker and the
Yeah.
subject?
And that
Right?
comes through in the film as well. The way she is
Yeah,
comfortable in even.
yeah, not just even crying, but we also see times in the film where she's not comfortable about it,
कि इतनी
right?
देर क्यों कर
And
रहे हो? And nobody asks me,
ah,
but you guys are staying here. She says that.
yeah, like what are you gonna do? She blatantly tells in the film, what are you gonna do by making this film? You talk to me when I'm sitting, you talk to me when I'm standing, but are you gonna bring me justice? You can't. She only says you can't bring me justice.
Yeah.
So, and there's that level of transparency had to be maintained. Even just to show the kind of relationship we had, it was not, even for her, she knew from the beginning, like there was nothing much that could be done, through this film or whatever. And the only purpose is we had to tell the audience that, we were doing this with her leading the process.
Right.
Like she would tell us when to start, she would tell us when to stop.
Mm.
you know
Yeah.
Sometimes she'll say, enough of your questions, go home, I'm done. And
Okay.
that is there in the film too. She'll say, like, enough of this, let me do my work.
Yeah.
And as a filmmaker and as an editor, I could have easily decided to chop those things off from
Mm.
the film and
Yeah.
not make the audience see it, but then I would lose the transparency
Yeah.
aspect
And
of
she is
it.
getting the agency to tell her story that way.
Yeah, primarily. And I've really tried to, how do we say, not put any of the other voices in the film.
Mm.
Like quite literally, in the film, you won't
Yeah.
hear any other person other than Ona.
Yeah, but you had
Like you
shot other people as well, right?
We did, yes. We did. We in fact had very elaborate interviews of, the lawyers, journalists giving their expert opinions,
Hmm.
but that would have been a completely different documentary and completely different. That would have been a documentary about the topic of witch hunting,
Hmm.
them telling their expert opinions, in a more
Yeah.
traditional, typical style. But somehow in the editing process, we decided that, I don't think we should hear anybody else
Hmm.
other than her because it's her story and only she has the right to tell it.
Yeah.
And that was the whole like sort of anchor, and that's how we constructed the film.
But
But yeah, the main challenge was to tell it with sensitivity and
in spite of so many people like social workers, lawyers, as you're saying, being there, like, why is she not getting justice till now?
it's a very complicated question, Anshul, because I think we're really talking about people who don't even have the basic necessities, that
Hmm.
we civilians have, for example, in the neighboring cities. We're talking about lives in the tribal villages, right?
Hmm.
And even for them, like, there is no, like, for example, to just say, let's say if it doesn't rain in those regions, if there is no rainfall, there won't be enough food for them to feed their families,
Right.
right? And we're talking about villages in like the very topmost hilly regions,
Hmm.
where even for the law and order to go to these places, it takes time.
Hmm.
Like from the neighboring city, which is Ahwa, to travel to these tribal villages in Dan by road, you have to really travel through a hill, and you only after traveling for 2 hours you'll reach one of the
Right.
villages. Right? So imagine doing that on a daily basis,
Hmm.
like going somewhere, and even for them to get on to a bus to go to a city to a court is a lot of financial expense
Yeah,
uh,
right.
from their perspective, right? The
Hmm.
court is not coming to their village. They have to go to the court,
Hmm.
right? So we're really talking about people who are living in these terrains who don't even have the basic necessities. So it's very difficult for them to expect to proactively fight, with the privileges that we
Hmm.
common civilians usually tend to have.
Yeah.
Like there's lack of electricity, there's lack of water, there's a lot of hunger in these regions. So looking at, and they're usually quite happy and self-sustained with uh, what they have because they usually get all their day-to-day stuff from the nature, from the forests, and their livelihood depends on these forests and stuff. So it's very difficult even for the police to come and actively to, although there has been an FIR, there has been the
Hmm.
case is still ongoing, but we have to consider a lot of these complex factors that are involved.
Yeah.
And and it's not just in this state or this region, right? You see this phenomena across every other state. Like unless we have something really substantial who's really pushing, like for example in Assam, like the work that Mission Birubala is doing, we need more of such organizations who can actively represent the survivors and really fight for their justice,
Hmm.
to really combat these attacks. And we need that infrastructure for such victims.
Right.
Unless that sort of infrastructure on that sort of scale is present, it's really tough for them because they've already gone through a lot of emotional turmoil. After going through a lot of emotional turmoil, any human would naturally be exhausted with
Yeah.
what is happening around them. Then really taking themselves to go and fight it's a lot.
Yeah.
So unless we have the infrastructure that is provided to them, there won't be anything much that you can do.
Right. Were there any women in the crew?
Not during the production because there were just 3 to 4, but there were women in the post production. For example, our colorist, was a woman. Our
Mhm.
post-production, the re-recording mixer, the final song mixer, she's a woman, and my producer is a woman, my
Okay.
wife Janet. So there were a lot of, and it was a decision that we had to make consciously, because again, during the production, we had to be very conscious of how, in because in the areas that we are going to, we have to be very respectful and careful about how
Yeah.
we are approaching things. And usually with even the in terms of the safety, and in terms of we just had to keep it very minimal, and just to go do the work and really come back quickly.
Yeah.
So based on these aspects, we decided to just go with 2 3 people and come out.
Because if for her also to open up to a woman would have been easier, maybe.
Totally, totally. I totally agree. But I think if maybe if I found a cinematographer who was a woman, maybe it would have been, I don't know how the output would have been, but I think I really wanted to work with the cinematographer, a
Yeah.
friend, and I primarily didn't look of it from a gender perspective. It's just like a
Mm.
collaboration on creative level. So, we thought
Right.
we'll work together, and that's how it happened. But if it was a cinematographer who's a woman, maybe the process would have been more easy. Like,
Yeah.
I totally agree with that, because it would have been more, there's a sort of natural empathy that really forms,
Yeah.
right? And totally, I agree. But that was a decision that we made long time back, and it just
While every day you used to shoot and go back to wherever you were staying, did you review your footage on a daily basis? Like,
absolutely, absolutely. We would shoot, we would come back, and then we would review the footage, and that's what informed us as to what else can we shoot the next day.
right,
Right? Because and one of the main things we did was not just to shoot what was happening in Ona's life, but also to shoot the neighboring villages, the neighboring landscapes.
right.
Right. So all of that decisions came from reviewing the footage on a daily basis. And it was just to, again, document not just her life, but in general, the life that is existing around her.
It was like her story is echoing through the landscape, which never heard it. Like, those people never heard her story. And now
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
yeah,
And landscapes play a huge important role, I think, in their lives, and even in the film too. There's this whole notion of being accused as a witch, and like, what exactly is a witch? What are they referring to? you know
right.
so there was all these inquiries that we have to sort of deal with visually, and try to create like a, I don't know, like a very unique experience.
So this I'll ask for the student filmmakers. Like, how do you get the funding at such a stage where nobody actually believes in you as an independent filmmaker?
Funding is a very tricky question, and it's very tough. I agree, especially if you want to make documentary films. But
Mm.
thankfully, the at least the landscape of the documentary filmmaking is slowly changing, as you're able to see a lot of grants that
Okay.
are being available to you, not just in India, but even across the world. Right? So you can apply to grants and see. And even in India, I feel there are like these new initiatives that
Yeah.
are being launched. Like, I know there's like Dockage,
Pakistan. Yeah. Pakistan, Dockers.
Dockage in Kolkata. There's like a bunch of other like really good
Yeah.
new things that are coming up, which could really propel your filmmaking process, that can actually, even though they don't necessarily give you funding, at least they'll help you connect to someone who can potentially be an investor, or
Mm.
stuff like that. But yeah, now I think the only way to survive in independent filmmaking is to just keep applying and see how you raise money from the grants. And it's one step at a time, right? So if you want to make a feature film, you first start with creating that 2 to 3 minute sample
Hmm.
that you can use to
Right.
apply for funding. So your first agenda is to make that 2 to 3 minute video sample, which is totally possible with your own crew, and all you have to do is say convincingly, what your film is going to be about. Then you take
Right.
that sample, then you put in the grant application, then you apply for more funding. Hopefully, if you get more, then you shoot more. So it's a very time-taking process, and it's a matter of perseverance and determination. Like,
Hmm.
how long can you
Yeah.
sustain?
But often filmmakers are categorized into fiction filmmakers and documentary filmmakers. So where do you see yourself? And is that line there for you? Will you be making a fiction film in the future?
Yeah, so I actually already made a fiction film
Okay.
too. Like my thesis film is actually a fiction film
Oh,
called Men in Blue, which I just
okay.
finished, and it's currently in the festival
Right.
rounds. So for me, I really like to explore both the forms. Like I love documentaries as much as I love fiction, and they have their own strengths and weaknesses.
Right.
So definitely in the future, I do see myself utilizing both the mediums in there, and it depends on what story comes to you, most naturally. Like sometimes you feel like you need to travel with a documentary. Sometimes fiction seems to be the most ideal format to tell it. So
Right.
I, I'm as a cinephile, I love both the practices, and as a filmmaker, I do want to do both.
So who are some of your favorite filmmakers and how like they influence your work in what ways?
Absolutely. I think there are a lot of them. It's tough to, like
Yeah.
box it into a few, but definitely, like from India, of course, the great Satyajit Ray, the great they've been amazing and just inspiring to tell you, what kind of stories can be told in our country and how to tell it. And even from abroad, someone like Werner Herzog, who again dabbles in both fiction and documentary. And at some point, you don't know, is this a fiction or is this a documentary, or how does he tell such great stories in such fascinating way in both the formats. Then there is this Portuguese filmmaker that I really love, Pedro Costa.
So
Pedro
yeah.
Costa, just for his sheer commitment on constantly telling and standing up for these people in these communities, who are being constantly at the margins. So Pedro Costa, Herzog, and even a filmmaker in Taiwan, Hao Shen, Hao
Okay.
Shen is so good, is like such a poetic quality to his films that I really love. So I can really go on and on, but these are like some of my really top filmmakers who really inspired me.
Yeah, so talking about the film festival circuit, like how do you crack that? And like how do you start applying to film festivals? What's the procedure like? Talking about like independent filmmakers for them.
Sure. So festivals are, I think, one of the ways in which you try to get your film seen. Not all films have to go through the film festivals route,
Hmm.
because there are other ways to reach your audience, at least right now, with all the different OTTs and whatnot.
Yeah.
But film festivals are good if you want to open your film in a completely, some people call it credible, but even now that term is really changing because of late people tend to accuse film festivals with having their own personal biases and in sort of their curation.
Yeah.
But really, when you start to make a film, ideally you should not think about any of these outlets. Like the entire focus should be on the process of making this film and make the film in your own
Hmm.
vision and your own way. And then once the film is complete, then the main thing that anyone would advise is to start applying to the big film festivals, which are like these very huge, of course, really big ones that are
Yeah.
very prestigious and good. So once you try applying for those, if at all you get selected, your world premiere should be at one of these prestigious festivals, and then you narrow down, then you start applying to the good national festivals, then you start applying to the regional festivals, then you start applying to the local festivals. So it's like you start very big and then you slowly trickle down and start. And the idea would be to really show your film in as many different countries as possible, right?
Hmm.
So if you open your film in Poland, then you wouldn't try to apply to a festival again in Poland.
Okay.
You would try to apply somewhere else in Germany, or
Hmm.
so it's a matter of really distributing, have your audience be distributed across the globe. as much as possible, and not just, so don't just apply for festivals in India, right? So try to see if you can reach a wider audience with different things.
Yeah. So do you think money comes here? Like, how do you make money as an independent filmmaker? You want to tell your stories, but like major industries don't believe in that.
Yeah,
Like
it's
Bollywood
tough
won't.
to make money as an independent filmmaker, and all the independent filmmakers that I know have some sort of a day job,
Uh,
if that makes sense. Like, for example, I'm an independent filmmaker and I'm teaching at this university. I'm teaching filmmaking, but this is my day job. This is what gives me money to get my bread and butter, right? But I have to make films too. So it's not just this, you should also do that. So just by surviving on films, then you have to make mainstream commercial films, which
yeah.
will give you a lot of money. You really want to see these things. And I think that's the beauty of documentary filmmaking too, because you never know what is unfolding, what
Hmm.
is going to unfold in front of you. So you have to be a deep observer of
Right.
things, and you have to have the patience to let things unfold,
Right.
without any interruption, and let your subject really carry the narrative, as to what they want to show to the camera, and what they want to tell to the camera.
Do you think if you had made the film now, you would have made it differently? Like some things you would have done differently? No?
I don't think so. I think I made the film exactly how uh, it it was meant to happen, right? Like, I can't even make a longer version of it, for example, because whatever needs to be told has been told
Hmm.
in whatever little time that we had.
Right.
And I think, yeah, I don't know how I would make it different. Probably I would do the same thing again and again.
The treatment of Bubble Man is very different from Testimony of Anna. So, did you have it in mind while shooting? Like, how was your procedure different for both these films?
Yeah, so Bubble Man was more of like a first semester project that you do in your film school, and it was also the first time me trying to make a documentary film. So I really didn't know how a documentary film should be made. So if you look at Bubble Man, it's more traditional and conventional in the
Yeah.
sense of, you see like there is a sit down interview,
Yeah.
and then there's like an observational style footage where you follow him doing his day-to-day lives, right? So it is a form of documentary where it's quite traditional, quite conventional, and I think it was good project for me to get used to the format of documentary filmmaking, just to see how you approach, like real people, and how do you make them comfortable in front of the camera. With Testimony of Anna, like, I think I had more time. It was short, like it was made in the course of 1 year,
Oh.
right? So because there's more time, there was more freedom for me to experiment with the form of documentary. Like, okay, I made this in my first semester. How do I challenge myself as a filmmaker and try to deviate from it a little bit and try to really push and experiment? What else can I, how else can I make a documentary that has not been done in the sort of documentaries that we are seeing? Of
Yeah.
course, I could have done with a sit down interview, even with, like Ona, and try to tell it, but I don't think it would have had the same impact that I was going for, at least for me. I think with this, we were really trying to discover a new uh, form of combining images and the audio, with the juxtaposition of trying to evoke something uh, more deeper than what the ordinary images would
So this
provide.
wasn't your classroom project, Testimony of Anna?
This is it is it
Okay,
is
this.
so Bubble, like a first year
Okay.
first semester project. Testimony of Anna is a second year project
Okay. What
that
course were you
that
doing
we
exactly? What
it's
course?
a master of fine arts and
Okay.
film and media.
Okay. Okay. So why did you decide to go there and do a film program and not in India?
So the original plan was to do in India. When I went to FTI, I went to SRFTI, and
Okay.
that was precisely the time when India was going through a very different political shift, and the chairpersons of these institutions were being appointed with someone else, and there was a lot of chaos
Hmm.
even in the student body back then, and all of them had advised me, don't come and join the institute. You will, I don't think it's a good time
Okay.
for you to join, just because of the big changes that were happening in these institutions, and they really scared me, because if not, FTI was my dream school. Like I have a huge respect for filmmakers who have graduated from that institute, and even for the kind of films they made. It was a
Right.
dream school, and it's just unfortunate that I happened to have ventured into that at the wrong time. So if I born a few years earlier and I was a little bit more older, I would have definitely joined.
Who are some of the documentary filmmakers that you admire?
Lots of them, like even in our India, for example, Mr. Anand Patwardhan,
Yeah.
the kind of work he does is really amazing, really inspiring. And then across India, like this Werner Herzog, who makes really fascinating, very fascinating documentary films. And then, like I said, even the Portuguese filmmaker Pedro Costa,
Yeah.
when watching this, you wouldn't know if it is a documentary or a fiction. It will just really blur the line for you. And uh, lots of them, I think I can just go on and on. But
Have
even
you
now in
watched?
India, you can see like there's, oh, sorry, can you
Yeah,
hear
yeah,
me?
yeah. You can go on. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah. Even in India right now, you can see the rise of these new documentary filmmakers, right, who are really doing some wonderful stuff. I feel, yeah, there's a lot of them.
Yeah. Have you watched R.V. Ramani's work?
Of course, yeah.
Have you?
Ramani sir
Yeah.
is really great. I've even taken an online course under him before,
Okay.
like when I was doing my film school. So yeah, yeah, huge respect for Ramani sir as well.
Yeah.
Uh, he's also an amazing documentary filmmaker.
He changed my perspective towards documentary. Like I watched Oh That's Bhanu, the one that won the national award, and it
Yeah,
changed my perspective. Like it's such a
yeah,
spontaneous medium. You can experiment with it in a way that you
yeah.
can't experiment with fiction right now. Like a lot has been done in fiction,
To
but documentary still has that scope. So yeah.
totally, totally agree. Yeah,
Will you be showing this film to Anna in the future ever? Or no?
I think it's tough for her to go through the whole ordeal again, and I think showing the film would only cause that and
Right.
nothing more. So I just don't think there's any point. Like I keep questioning what's the point of me making this film, right? Even
Yeah.
she says that, like, what's the point in making this film? I don't know. I keep it's a tough question to answer, and it's yeah, it's tough to live with that emotional baggage as
Yeah.
a documentary filmmaker, and that's, at least that's what fiction makes it simpler.
Hmm.
In fiction you have to deal with this constant, at least, yes, it's a fictional story that
Yeah.
I'm telling. With documentary, that's not the case. It affects you on a personal level because it's happening to a real person,
Yeah.
in real life. So it's tough to get over that.
And you have a responsibility to give back to the community that you just invaded in one day, like, and I want to make a film on you. In a way, you have a responsibility to give it something back. That's what the dilemma
Totally,
is.
totally. I mean, totally. I think every documentary filmmaker should have that responsibility, should have that sort of what should we say, they should be dealing with utmost respect and care for
Mm.
the communities who have welcomed you in the first place to make a film about them,
Yeah.
right? So you should have a mutual sort of respect and care for them as well. And if you're really operating on a big scale, like if you have means and power to really change things up, and like really provide the infrastructure to them, you should, like but I think at some point we will have uh, we will be able to do such things, I feel, provided, like, I keep seeing these amazing documentary films across the world who made a feature length film and then they launch a particular impact campaign for the
Mhm.
film, where people from all around the world contribute to that campaign, and then using that, they're able to give it back to the
Yeah.
communities, for the betterment of their lives, you know. So if
Mm.
you're really operating on that scale and that level, if your film really has the potential to draw such big audience, you do have the responsibility to, like really give it back. And hopefully, I think that should be the aspiration of every documentary filmmaker, to be able to. Then you're actually changing the world. You're not just trying to make a film. You're actually having a real impact on their lives.
Are you
So.
working on like your next film?
Yeah, there are like a couple of new projects that we are tackling right now. One of them is a fiction, and then one of them is a documentary
Okay.
as well. So, and this time we want to move from the short format to the long format. So
Right.
we really want to try to do like a feature version of things, and I think that obviously takes more time. So we're trying to see how we can get there, and it's a long process.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sachin sir, for coming here.
Yeah, oh, all good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
And we need more
for inviting me.
filmmakers like you who raise these issues which have been somewhere submerged. So thank you so much
Right.
for joining